show. Let's go. Line number 3. Say good morning to the independent member of the House of Assembly, serving the folks in Mount Pearl, Southlands, Paul Lane. Paul, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you this morning?
Not too bad. How about you?
Great, Paddy. Paddy, before I get to my topic, I just want to say that just as a little update, I did have a sit-down meeting with the Auditor General about a week ago, and we had a great discussion about the numerous concerns that people have with Nalcor, and I left the meeting feeling very optimistic that we're going to see some action, hopefully, in not too near distant future. So,
well, let's hope so.
Let's hope so.
Well, it's good for everybody, and you know what? Yep. Believe it or not, Liberal government, it's actually good for you too. It will give people some comfort in knowing that we've had a look. It doesn't imply that there's any nefarious goings on or shenanigans, but it'll be nice to have our first real open book look. So we'll see what happens. My only concern on that front, Paul, is that even Terry Padden has said they need additional resources and commitment of time and resources to do this properly, because this is not just like doing their annual work. I don't think this will be on top of everything else. So between that and the ability for them to keep or hire resources for that task, and at the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, there's two offices I worry about whether or not they'll be funded properly to do their job.
Yeah, absolutely, and I never took it from the approach of additional work, to be honest with you. I mean, I just took it from the approach of just making it a priority and maybe doing it like take a multi-year approach to it and pick out some. So we talked about some things that I thought might be priorities and so on, and he certainly listened. So we'll see what happens, but I'm feeling optimistic we're going to see some movement. So that would be great.
Absolutely right. I think everyone would welcome it.
Absolutely. Paddy, I wanted to talk about the workers' compensation, and I know you've had a number of discussions with people about it over the years, and I know there were some issues even raised yesterday, and certainly the very tragic circumstance with Mr. Dunphy and so on. But Paddy, in particular, I want to talk about the Workers' Compensation Review Division. And, of course, that is the division that people go to. Once you file a claim with workers' comp, whether it be an injury claim or whether it be, looking for additional physiotherapy or treatments or whatever the case might be, and you do so through your caseworker and so on, if that gets turned down, there's two mechanisms for appeal. First of all, there's the internal appeal that happens, internal review it's called. And if you don't get any satisfaction, then you have the ability to go to the Workers' Comp Review Division, which is an independent agency, if you will, with independent commissioners who will hear the injured worker's case and render a decision. We've had issues here, as you may recall, for the last number of years with a number of backlog cases, and it was certainly something that I've raised in the House of Assembly, and I raised publicly with all the backlogs and all the injured workers waiting to have their cases heard. And we did see some movement, and there has been some improvement in terms of the number of cases that are backlogged, but we're still nowhere near the legislated timeframes. And under the legislation, from the time a request has gone into the review division to have a case heard, to the time that the decision is returned to that injured worker, they have 60 days to do it. Now, there are, of course, there will always be people who will argue, well, the 60 days enough. And at one point in time, it was 120 days, I understand it. It was then reduced to 90 and then down to 60. And that was as a result of the statutory reviews that occur every 4 or 5 years. And I guess it was determined that, that we need to make these hearings a priority so that, injured workers are not waiting to get their cases heard, because, there are so many cases where we have an injured worker who have had to wait an inordinate amount of time to get their case heard. And in the meantime, while they're waiting, I've certainly heard stories where people have lost their homes, they've lost their marriages, and we've heard cases, where workers have, suffered from depression and other forms of mental illness as a result of all the stress
Yeah, so where are we now? What kind of turnaround times are we looking at now? Because at one point, remember back when, of course, when Jody Manning was appointed by Mr. Davis, the cabinet, she was one of the people that had been charged with trying to clear up some of that backlog, her and others. But that's what it was, huge news, and that was the big issue at Workers' Camp. So where are we now?
Well, I contacted them, and as of August the 26th, which was, the latest data they could go back in on their computer system, I guess, with all the numbers. As of August 26th, there was 110 applications in the queue for review at various stages. I was told that the 60-day legislative time frame has never been met, ever. And that currently the average time for an application from application to decision rendered, the average is 292 days compared to the 60 days under legislation. We're at 292, which is absolutely huge. Now, they did note, and I think it's, to be fair, that in some cases the delays could be on behalf of the worker, where the worker, or the person representing the worker could have asked for extensions or whatever. But even if we took even if we said half of the delays were caused by the worker, which in my experience in doing this for a living prior to getting to politics, I can tell you that I really don't believe that it would be half. But even if it was half, that'd be 146 days compared to 60 days. And it seems the most significant factor is around getting the cases heard as opposed to the time to process, because I'm told that the average, once a case is heard, the average turnaround time is 65 days of the 292, which means that would be 220-odd days on average waiting to get your case heard by the review division. Paddy, the other thing that's important to note here, and this is the most important point, under the legislation, the minister can appoint the commissioners, and the minister has the ability under legislation to appoint up to 7 commissioners for the purposes of hearing these cases.
Yep.
And currently we have 4. So it's a matter of resources. We can definitely get these times down if the minister were to appoint additional commissioners, which he has the right to do. And for anyone who is listening to us now and saying, this is a budgetary issue and we're in tough times and so on, that, maybe we can't afford this, I would just simply say and remind people, if they weren't aware, that this is paid for under the injury fund.
That's exactly right.
100% employer paid. So this would not cost the taxpayers not one penny to put in the required resources so that injured workers can have their cases heard in a timely manner.
And that's the summary, and that's all anyone needs to know. Absolutely. This is not budgetary measure issues, the woe is me. That money is there. And, it's not just has to be funded by someone. That's sitting in the bank right now.
There is a very healthy injury fund, as I understand it.
There's massive amounts of money in that account. This can be done. And it's also, I think, I just want to make this point before we go to the news. That's an excellent point, and I'm glad you brought the numbers forward, because 292 is not acceptable. And if people are talking about dollars and cents, even though we will not be affected by the hiring of additional resources, if it's a dollars and cents issue, what are the additional costs to the taxpayer fueled pockets, say for health care and or mental health services, or people who have now potentially been in a position to lose their home and their family and their marriage, whatever the case may be? Absolutely. Those economic issues and numbers are drastically more important than the ones it would be to hire a few lawyers to take on some backlog of these cases need to be heard. And the last point, then I'll let you wrap up.
Sure.
Trish, when I spoke with Trish Todd yesterday, for there to be a counseling service available too, because no one asks to be hurt, no one wants to be hurt. The devastation of your life changing, lifestyle changing, money coming in the door, and the dealing with your injury has obvious ramifications for your mental health. There's got to be a component of WCB that deals with that as a standalone issue, and there's not. So I know they have some counseling, but a caseworker there is not the same as seeing a mental health professional. So
absolutely,
things like that, more could be done. Paul, I'll let you wrap it up quick before I go.
Yeah, no, Paddy, I think you've summed it up. I totally agree that, sometimes people don't realize, the stress that these things can put people under and how it does impact their mental health, because, let's face it, if you're in a situation where you're gainfully employed and you have bills which are associated to, the money that you're taking in, you have a mortgage to pay and a car payment and so on, all of a sudden that's taken away from you because of an injury that occurred on the job. And then, like I said, in some cases, not in all these cases. Some of these cases might be someone that, who's looking for additional physio or whatever, But in a lot of these cases, it could be someone whose claim was turned down for whatever reason. They're appealing it, and now they could be waiting, like I said, on average 292 days with no income coming in the door, forced to go on income support. And how are you supposed to do that when you got a mortgage to pay and car payments and so on? You simply can't do it, and that's it's a real shame, and it's a real crime as far as I'm concerned. What's happening to some of these injured workers, and we need to change it.
That we do, Paul. Really appreciate your time this morning.
All right, thank you, Paddy. And I call on the minister to hire some more commissioner. The ability is there. It's there in legislation. The money is there. Let's get it done.
Sounds about right to me. Take care of yourself. Okay.
Thank you, Paddy.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.